We're 6 days out from Election Day, and there are already questions surrounding election integrity, but also the right of people to vote. To start, in Virginia, Governor Gov Youngkin instituted a voter removal program based on a 2006 state law that removes non-citizens ineligible to vote. Roughly 1,600 alleged non-citizens were removed from Virginia's voter rolls before a lower court restored their voting rights. 26 attorneys general joined Virginia on Monday in urging the Supreme Court to halt the lower court's decision. And the Supreme Court just ruled 6-3 to allow Virginia to remove those alleged non-citizens from its voter rolls.
Elon Musk reacted to the news on X earlier, writing, quote, "How insane is it that the Biden-Harris administration is suing states to keep non-citizens on their voter rolls?" Meanwhile, hundreds of ballots were destroyed by fires this week at 2 ballot drop boxes in the Pacific Northwest. Investigators are still searching for the culprit they claim is responsible for both. While many of the ballots in Portland were unaffected, hundreds were destroyed in the fire nearby in Vancouver, Washington. And then there were also reports that there was a Pennsylvania investigation that uncovered allegedly thousands of fraudulent registrations close to the deadline. We haven't heard much more about that, but needless to say, I think the voters are looking at this and going, oh my gosh, here we go again. Sure. We're going to have another 2020. It's hard to have confidence when hundreds of ballots are being burned up in a mailbox.
Not the best visual for sure. The ballot boxes on fire. That's definitely not great. So look, on the Virginia case, I suspect this is going to be the topic today that maybe you and I have the strongest.
I think that's probably right.
Because so here's my view, and I want, obviously you'll give yours to counter it. I think that this has been mischaracterized in a lot of ways, because the issue is not really Virginia wants to get rid of non-citizens and the Biden administration or somebody else is nefariously trying to keep those people on the rolls. There is a law called the National Voter Registration Act, and that law has a 90-day period, the so-called quiet period provision, which basically means the voter rolls should be set 90 days in advance of an election. And if you start meddling with them systematically after that point, A, it's against the law, and B, the reason it's against the law is because people who get struck off of the voter rolls don't have time to seek redress and therefore run the risk of being disenfranchised. And in one of the counties in Virginia, according to the Department of Justice, about a quarter of the people who were struck off were in fact entitled to vote. And they would then lose what is a legitimate and very important right in any democracy or republic.
Yes, and so I think the key distinction here is whether it's individual versus systematic. And here is the process under the Virginia state law, which I think suggests to me that it's individual rather than systematic. So the process goes that the self-identified non-citizen, this is someone who checks the form, are you a citizen when registering at the DMV? No. Okay, so the state reaches out to them. They get a letter from the Department of Elections stating that they have been flagged for removal from the voter rolls. Then they have 14 days to affirm that they are indeed a citizen, during which they would be added back onto the voter rolls. And if they do not, they are removed, but then they have another safeguard, which is that Virginia has same-day registration to get back on the rolls. And although there's this 90-day quiet period, they have also had Democratic governors Ralph Northam and Terry McAuliffe similarly remove non-citizens under this law in October prior to a presidential election. So that's where Virginia Governor Gov Youngkin says there's a double standard here. My Democratic predecessors have both done this. They've both argued it's on an individual basis, and yet you're accusing me of doing it systematically, even though we are contacting every single individual voter to ask them if they did indeed mean to check the box that they're a non-citizen.
You're completely right that the point really is the word systematic and whether this is systematic or not. Now, I would argue that it is systematic because it is a program put in place, and the basic ruling or argument is that thing about the DMV. Now, that to me is a systematic matching of records from one part to another part with the intention of catching ineligible voters. I have no problem at all with catching ineligible voters if there is sufficient safeguards in place for people to fight that decision. There is an argument being made by other groups associated with this issue that people have been struck off who were eligible to vote, and that furthermore, there seems to be at least some confusion. If someone goes to the DMV or went to the DMV 8 years ago, they may have said, no, I'm not a citizen, and become a citizen subsequently. And it's not entirely clear that that obviously completely legitimate change in status is really being caught in this system.
Yeah, I think there have been some people who did get the letter and then they were able to update their voter registration. At least that's the claim of the governor. But to me, the curing period that they're offered, right, this 14 days after they get the letter, and then they can still do same-day registration. The curing period for me and the individual letters that go out is what changes it from systematic to individual. So I buy your argument totally that if this were just a DMV program, you check the box, you're off the rolls, that's it, that would be systematic. But I think the follow-up and the ability for them to cure the ballot is what changes it to an individual process.
So far be it from me to be cynical. I think those are all valid arguments. One thing that I'm suspicious of is that the program that we're talking about was reinstituted on a date exactly 90 days from election day. And so I wonder, frankly, whether part of Northam's Governor Youngkin's motivation is to actually create a controversy intended to cast the Biden administration as falsely wanting non-citizens on the voter rolls, which I don't think is true.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, obviously I have no way of getting into his brain and asking him his motivation. The timing is definitely interesting. I'll grant you that point. But I guess the question too is, from the legal standpoint, they took it to SCOTUS. Supreme Court ruled in Virginia's favor after the lower court would not let them remove these voters. That's going to be the final say. So I guess he won.
Yeah, exactly. I guess those voters are out.
So I guess our legal opinions don't really matter.
Exactly. Well, it's good to have the argument.
I know, no, totally.
To carry the day in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm sure he's celebrating right now, as is Elon Musk apparently. So
sure.
We're going to leave it there. We have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this.